Welcome to the realm of ideas is free to all. This is actually episode 1, the operation of the metaphor. What I'm going to do is kind of continue a group of discussions or ruminations about my thoughts about ideas present to me. Art Science Complex is an interdisciplinary platform for collaborative work. I am an architect. My co-founder, Julie Rauer, is a painter and a writer. We've done various different projects with different individuals. But anyway, what happens is over the course of my work as an architect and a researcher, I've come across certain things that are important to me. And I find that by talking through them, I actually allow myself to kind of better understand them. So for me, the first one is the operation of the metaphor. The operation of the metaphor is something that I use as a specific term to talk about the way in which a certain generative strategy has come about in terms of my understanding of this concept. So let me say quickly in terms of what I feel a metaphor is. I believe that the combination of concepts or consequential formulations generates and constructs new from the existing concepts or consequential formulations. So the idea is a metaphor is not just based on the similarity with which one would say that something comes together to kind of share a similarity in terms of words. These are generative strategies for entanglement for ideas to generate new ideas. So what happens is these consequential formulations become the essential formulation of greater formulations. An example is the fact that something becomes useful. So lines and symbolizations can be put together to create a map, and the map has a usefulness because it allows us to kind of identify points of reference. So just the same way that someone could say that we use the kind of concept of a simile is that we say that like a ship plows the ocean. This is not what we're talking about here. We're talking about something in terms of the idea that the similarity talks to a deeper understanding of formulation. A person who I came across in my student days, who I kind of feel was very, very important to me, spoke about this. Ortega Gasset, the author of The Revolt of the Masses and several other very important books in the early part of the 20th century, wrote a book called Phenomenology in Art. And in that book, he basically had an early essay. Oh, if you hear anything in the background, that's WQXR, our local radio station. We missed Nimet, and I think it was terrible what happened. The overnight now is basically without commentary, which I think is quite bizarre. If Nimet Hamashi, who was someone who I listened to for 4 decades, had a tremendously great understanding of music as well as having the most brilliant of voices. Anyway, she is greatly missed. But what you were hearing in the background is Gustav Mahler's Fourth Symphony, I believe, but I'm not really sure. Oh, thank you, Julie. Hi, Julie.
It's called Songs of the Wayfarers.
Songs of the Wayfarers. Okay, good guess though. Like Mahler was easy, but to kind of think to say that was the fourth. All right, so in his essay, right, he comes up an essay in text by way of a preface. Ortega talks about the idea of the metaphor, and he talks about it in a specific way that I think is very important to kind of understand. And I'll kind of read that just so we kind of have an understanding. A Valencian poet, Lopez Pico, writes that the cypress is like the ghost of a dead flame. This is a suggestive metaphor. That what is the metaphorical object here? It is neither the cypress nor the flame nor the ghost. All these belong to the realm of real images. The new object that confronts us is the cypred ghost of a flame. Notice, however, that this cypress is not a cypress, nor the ghost a ghost, nor the flame a flame. If we want to keep what remains of the cypress, rather than similarity, is what remains, right? It has been transformed into a flame. This can only be the literal identity that exists between the linear outline of both. This is the real point of resemblance between them. In every metaphor, there is a true resemblance between its elements. And because of this, it was thought that metaphor was essentially an assimilation, even an assimilative juxtaposition of very different things. This is an error. In the first place, the greater or lesser difference between things can only mean a greater or lesser resemblance between them. Very distant on these grounds is equivalent to quite unlike. And yet, metaphor, this is key, satisfies us precisely because in it we find a coincidence between two things that is a more profound and decisive than any mere resemblance. So the point is, the key, which I think is crucial, right, is the fact that it's generative, is that this deeper consequence is the creation of the cypress ghost with flame, or glass bottle fascination, or other things that come to become their own essence. So what happens is we generate. Now, I believe that that's something that allows us to go and see analogies and actual true constructions in other places. I believe the metaphor has a selective as well as an artificial capacity. And I believe that the entanglement comes from this very real circumstance. So, just to clarify, the generation of concepts as the result of construction of existing concepts, or to substitute consequential formulations instead of concepts. So that's kind of what I think becomes the basis of this thing. Now, language has, oh, thanks, by the way.
Sure. That's it.
Oh, okay. Is this our copy?
Yeah.
That's not what's playing because you're listening to QXR.
No, but it's the same thing.
Ah, yes.
It's
Thanks,
ours.
brother.
So if you want to show people.
Oh, yeah. Oops, let me see if I can get the glare. It's a lot of glare. Hard to see when I put these things there.
Yeah.
This is our copy. Oh,
Yeah, I think people
there we
know
go.
about it.
All right. Okay. So what I'm going to do in the next couple of programs is kind of talk about the two aspects. The one I see, which is like the fact that this generative strategy is not just a literary or artistic strategy, that it's actually ingrained in the way in which nature evolves. So, in fact, it's kind of very much embedded in the way in which nature kind of acts. And I'll kind of talk about that next, because I think the next piece will be, let's see, I think the next one will be next week will be, let's see, yes, the organic metaphor, and then the artificial or aesthetic metaphor. Now, I am starting at 3:00 New York City time, so this is like Saturday night into Sunday morning, and so it kind of is a kind of a strange time for me, but I guess it's kind of a fun time for everyone else because there's still people kind of up and about. So I think this is going to turn out to be a fairly decent time. Anyway, we'll see. So that's the next part will basically be the organic component, and I basically talk about how I see these things in terms of that consequential aspect. But this is just an introduction to the fact that these things go beyond just simply the play of words to create, kind of like interesting language. I believe this is not about language. I believe it's about concepts. It's about the idea of generation. And it's about generation in not just an artistic sense, but it's in a kind of an actual real sense. And that we mimic in our artificial constructions those things that exist in a more concrete sense in the the natural world. So I believe that like the accretion of entanglement is probably more fitting in terms of resemblance. I feel as if the entanglement is what gives the the necessity for the generation. So that's what I feel is kind of like a key component to that. So um, let's see. I think that there are, as a result, certain things that even become kind of socially active in the fact that they become realities that kind of become what I would call unbreakable bonds, which will be another component I'll talk about. And the unbreakable bond are things that we find a kind of consequential usefulness as they kind of start to become uh, reasonably entangled, and that they can be dismantled, but at the same time they cannot be. They become necessary and become something that people have to understand that once they're untangled, because it can be untangled, there's a great loss. An example of that would be the fact that we in our society have been able to take our technique and we have kind of we have bonded that or we have entangled that with reason or science. So rather than superstition being the entangled component with technique, in our case, we have the advantage of the idea of testing materials or testing hypotheses or testing things in a way that we can have kind of tangible results. And this has become useful. Now, I use the term useful in the context of like, Hume's idea of skepticism, in the fact that though we never can ultimately know the value of something, if it's true, it does, like a map, provide a usefulness in the fact that something can be of a use in terms of locating myself to different places, allowing me to kind of travel distances and not get lost. So a map becomes a useful thing. So in terms of uh, these consequential formulations, things like tree, chair, map, these things become universal in the fact that almost any person that you would speak to, even if you didn't share their language, you would find that they understand the idea of a tree or a plane or a point. So these kind of things become generated as kind of important things for us to use in terms of the ability to kind of refer to each other. Now, I'll go into more detail next week in terms of the aspects of the natural, the organic metaphor, and then I will come back and talk about the aesthetic or the artificial metaphor. But that's pretty much the concept that I wanted to get across today in the in this introduction. So um, that's pretty much it. Again, this is just a kind of series of ruminations for me about ideas that have kind of become very important in my own work and my own investigations. So the first one I think is kind of important, but I think it's important to kind of lay this out as this not just a kind of like playful language among words in language, but actually a generative strategy that kind of mimics a reality that exists in nature that we've basically found and can use. So, in terms of the ideas where we have uh, this capacity. And I think one of the things that happens in a way to kind of look at this is that we can generate it from concepts. And that's what we understand in terms of like what I would say words, or like similes and things like that, where we associate and a resemblance. But then there's the fact that there's the generation from objects of new objects. And then another thing, which I think is something that's kind of subtle, nuanced, but I think very, very important to understand, which is that there is a character present in an object that is unseen. And what I mean by that is people have a kind of possessiveness of things. And someone will kind of talk about the idea of appropriation or thievery. And a good example is the fact that if I can see a consequence that has been overlooked or misunderstood or not understood, this is a result of my genius. This is not the result of me stealing something, because what I've done is I've discovered something that everyone else had the same ability to understand, but unfortunately did not come up to the formulation. So that idea is something that I think people have to contend with as part of the idea of the value of this generative strategy. So if someone says, "Oh yeah, but we had that," it's like, yeah, but you weren't capable of using that in the consequential way that it was used once it was discovered to have this capability. So that discovery, right, that generative aspect is not due to any malfeasance or any kind of negative impact. It's a result of genius. It's a result of the fact that someone can understand that something could be in combination in terms of generation from scratch, or could be generation from concepts, generation from objects, or basically inherent but unidentified. So that's a lot to take in to begin with. I mean, this is kind of like we kind of off to a nice start. So hopefully we'll kind of have this this enjoyable kind of talk. I mean, again, since this is something that just kind of dropped out of the sky, I don't expect anyone to kind of be here right away. But I did enjoy making this video. So this is episode 1. This is The Realm of Ideas is Free to All. And Julie's over by my side, starting a new painting.
Hello.
Hello. And behind me is the laboratory or the library, whatever we call it in our kind of like realm of whatever it is we do here. But anyway, so this is The Realm of Ideas is Free to All, episode 1, the operation of metaphor. And we close with a statement that I think is very important, because actually I found out a couple of weeks ago when I started this investigation, I started saying these things. I didn't realize just exactly how vitally important it is to understand the necessity of this, because some people have a kind of certain siege mentality, or kind of have a kind of like feeling where they don't want to give way to having the realm of ideas free to all. Now, like we spoke about in the introduction, the realm of ideas is free to all, and it's necessary. Now, that's why it's important to have the realm of ideas. Now, the realm of ideas is not for everyone, but it's definitely something that many people see as necessary, such as myself. So in closing, the realm of ideas is free to all, and it's to all of our benefit to keep it this way. And let's hope that we can do that. All right. Thank you, and good night or good morning.